Hey guys, Kid here, Burn 1, Shadowverse Evolve, you know the drill. I'm joined with my same co-host from the set review. We got Pressure and Shepard here. You guys want to say hi?
Howdy.
Hello.
All right, we're here to give you the most correct tier list there ever is, ever, period. I don't think anyone will challenge us at all, not even once. So
I'm not even sure outside of like placements. I think we'll figure it out.
I feel like last set we had a good tier list, and honestly, looking back, I think I agree with almost all of it. But now the set, I could come back a month from now and just be like, "Oh, I was wrong about every placement."
I agree heavily. Like, I think the biggest difference is we were all really grinding the last set a bunch for quite a while, and so we kind of had like really good understanding of like the entire meta completely. This set we grinded it a bit, but we didn't get to like do every single matchup right and things like that.
Yeah, I think the other thing is like the decks are going to be a little bit more meta dependent because now there's very clearly like, okay, these are the control strategy, these are the aggro strategies, and those existed more than just like a vague, loose arrangement.
Yeah, I think before we hop in, I guess like I think we talked about this a little bit, or Pressure brought it up in the set review, but like this meta is going to definitely be more of a mid-range to control like type of era. I think all the aggro decks are just going to struggle a bit more.
Yeah.
Do you guys agree with that overall?
I mean, so. There's one big exception to that. There's one aggro deck I think that we'll get there.
You just lost to it. So But I think it's just this. I think this might be the most varied opinionated meta like almost of all time, because there's no big tournaments, there's only locals, and there's like so many new archetypes and old archetypes that you could sit down across from someone and they flip over leader and it could be 4 different decks. And like I always say, you can go 3 and 2 in top 8, so people are going to think decks are good because of experience or whatever, like, oh, they won a couple locals with it, or they did pretty well in a couple locals with it, versus it's actually being good or not. So I think this might be the most like opinionated meta, you know, like, because it's just like I can see us looking back in like 6 months and every single person sounds like they're like
they're on some stuff.
Yeah. So
yeah. All right. So we'll kind of jump into this. These were kind of the decks we picked out to just like represent. Like maybe there are some other decks out there that we don't have represented here, but we think these are the main ones that are actually worth talking about, that are going to be tiered in some way, or you should see it at some point at your locals. Or I guess I think they're doing like shop challenges for the buy card this season. So that's like the highest level competitive play we can have, which is just like a super locals essentially. So I think this kind of wraps up what we think should be played. Should we just get like the egg out of the way immediately? Because I think egg is definitely tier 1 this time around. It got extra tools. The 2-drop lets you find what's that? Andromeda, right? Which is like pretty big. So if you need to set up a turn to combo with egg, you can find Andromedas to add to your hand to get to that point. Whereas before you kind of just had to be like, oops, I drew into it and now I can egg and still have a board.
I would say that previously Egg's scariest draws were always the ones where they just like played a straight aggro deck at you, you know, where they went like Faria on 1, Andromeda Faria on 2, and then Alice on 3 into the egg stuff. And like now they just have a lot more draws like that between the book, between Fina, and the deck is somehow even scarier to sit down across from. And we just talked about aggro decks like struggling, but the thing is this deck just has so much resilience and so much reach, and it burns you just really, really quickly. I think it's just the best deck.
Yeah, I think it's the best deck too, but I am worried about just it getting really hard countered and hard teched for, because now that Lyriel exists, I think this deck is going to have a really big issue with Lyriel. It's really hard to clear for the deck. It can just shut off what would be lethal turns, and it's very hard to get around Lyriel for Alice, or what are we calling it? Fable or whatever, you know. Yeah. And I think that the pattern of our community so far, the English community, has been they take like the best deck from Japan and try to counter it or try to build decks that counter it. And I think that will happen with this deck. And it's also just basically now an aggro deck, and it has all the faults of an aggro deck in this game where your opponent you lose the dice roll and you go second, and then your opponent sees Angelic Snipe and Surefire, and you have a really low chance of winning. And then if they have Lyrial, you just auto lose. It's I think that's going to come up a lot. I do still think it is just the best deck, but I think that's mostly because it's probably the closest to the most consistent deck in the format.
Yeah, I would say for me, I take into account when I'm thinking about the power level of these decks, not just in the abstract, but the fact that this is like go win your local to get a buy card. And I think that changes kind of what decks I want to play, where I am a little bit more interested in decks that I can just like spike with, if that makes sense. Like I don't want to consistently go 3-2 over 5 rounds. I want to go 3-0 once or 4-0 once.
So do you mean that's a positive for this deck or a negative?
Yeah, I think that's a positive because it's
you
like,
think that's a positive for this deck?
Well, because I think this deck has huge spikes where like you outline the scenario where you feel bad with this deck, but every scenario where your opponent doesn't have, snipe, surefire bullet plus some healing, like you can just run over them with like not most of your hands, but with a lot of them. And the ones that don't run over them still have like a really solid amount of fair play later on.
That's interesting because I think the opposite, where it's a local, format. So I think the chance that you in your 4 to 5 rounds you run into one or two of those guys that are playing just the hard counter egg, stuff. And it's not even hard counter, it's just Angelic Snipe, Surefire, and Lyrial. Like those are 3 cards you can put in almost any deck. I think the chance is higher than in a big tournament where people are trying to go 4-2, 3-2. I think that since you have to win every game to get the buy card, probably, unless there's like a cut to top 8 or something at a local, I think for me, in my opinion, I think that's makes it worse. I think that makes it a worse choice for this format. But.
Interesting. I would wager if you had to pick any deck to bring to try and get your buy card, this is probably the one that's going to most likely do it for you.
I think one thing too is I'm not 100% sure on this. I wish I actually spent more time watching JP stuff and looking at their GP like I normally do. But I wasn't as invested in this meta because I know there's no huge tournament. But I think was it Lyria, right? The angel that stops burn damage.
Lyrial.
Yeah, Lyrial. I feel like we are already on that, or at least the West or the English side of the game is already like made quite aware that this card is really good. Whereas I think early on in this meta in JP, it didn't click too quickly that like actually this card is really, really good. Because from when I was looking at deck list, it seemed like that card in the beginning wasn't showing up that much. And then suddenly near the end of the meta, it was like in every deck almost.
Yeah, it was in only one of the top 8 GP lists in the Force list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so I think that's a good read, or that's a correct call.
Yeah, and I mean
we'll see too, because like I would say I haven't played enough with and against it to see how much equity you get from playing, the first Lyrial. Like obviously it swings the game pretty far in your favor, but I haven't played with enough to say like, okay, does it make it unwinnable, or does it just give you another 10% equity in the matchup?
Yeah,
which is a lot, but also then you have to divide that by the chance to draw it, the chance to be playing against Egg, and so on and so forth.
I mean, I think with Lyrial, it's good against like other decks too. Like it's good against Disdain, it's good against Silverbolt.
I agree with that.
I think one thing to note too is just like because we have no big events. I mean, we're already alluding this to a lot, but like Egg can not even be at your locals at all ever, and so your meta will be completely different. And Egg is actually not the best deck ever, and there's no reason to run that card, right? A lot of this, at the end of the day, does come down to your local meta and what you're seeing there. Because like some people will hyper like you beat them one week, and the next week they show up. They're just like they put every tech card to beat only you, and then you're just like, well, I guess my deck is bad. When in reality, no, you were just like incredibly teched against. But that, just to keep that in mind there.
It's definitely the gatekeeper though, or not even the gatekeeper, it is the gate. It is just just because I think every other deck we talk about, I'm gonna have like well, this deck doesn't have such and such to beat egg, so it's like worse. Like it is just the deck of the format, I think.
Okay, yeah. All right. Where do you guys want to start next? Do you want to kind of fill out tier 1, or do you want to just
Let's just go left to right. Nice
Yeah,
and
I
even
think let's go
split.
left to right. Yeah.
Okay. Down here we have our little boy Roach. He's kind of back because we got some of the tools to make more of an aggressive like Storm Roach deck, because you have a lot of access to what's your favorite one drop again, Shepard?
Oh my god. You talking about Sakuna?
Yeah, you have like Sakuna, which is very aggressive, like and you can combo with Roach as well, and then you have Sansuzuka. You just have access to a lot of like pretty silly strong like storm followers, so you can pressure the board and stuff like that. So this deck kind of becomes a thing, but I don't think it's like really worth investing a lot of time into. It's like probably the worst forest deck out of all of them right now. What do you think?
I feel like this and the Spinaria deck are the same deck. Like I feel like you play Roach in the Spinaria deck.
Yeah, it probably is basically the same deck. Maybe we include both of them by accident, but
yeah, maybe we just because I don't know. That's just my opinion. If you guys have different, but like because I'm just thinking like I'm trying to think of the deck construction that has Roach and doesn't have Spinaria, and like what
and how different they are. I think you're right. I think they're basically the same deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Because it's like it's supposed to be like the combo, you're playing it's like aggro-ish, you're playing a bunch of things from hand. You're more board-based combo. I feel like that's Spinaria as well. I don't know though. I mean, we can.
I think you're kind of right. Like maybe there are some like small deviations you can make, but I think they both essentially kind of play the same. But maybe we just have Roach be the more aggressive side of it, and then Spinaria is just more of the mid-rangey side.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
But where do you think this like Roach combo stuff should go? I feel like it's kind of like a tier 3 or tier 4.
Yeah. I think it's 4 because you mentioned two cards that both die to snipe, and we're going into a meta where
everyone's playing control. Yeah. Do you have a different opinion, Shepard?
No, this deck sucks, dude. I mean, it's not even that it sucks. It's like there are worse decks in it. The problem with it is, I mentioned this a lot the last time we did a tier list, where it's like, okay, here's a deck that to play this deck, you have to then choose to not put like all the good cards in your like deck, right? Like you're not playing the strat. Or sorry, this is not making any sense. This deck is just so much worse than the other forest decks that I could like never imagine wanting to sleeve it up, unless it was just because you really enjoy it or find it fun. Like I'm not that high on forest this set, but like even with the new tools, this just still feels like you're on a worse game plan than Elephant, Silverbolt, etc.
Yeah, I think there's nothing really to add to that. I guess since this is kind of the same thing, Spinaria, are we just kind of considering in the same wheelhouse, or is this more like tier 3 for playing more of a mid-range game plan?
I would say it's a little bit better than like full-on Roach and Sansuzuka and stuff, just because it just has more
going on for
power. And like Shepard was saying, you're playing more of the good force cards. You're still not playing every single previous good force card, but I don't think it's. I mean, yeah, I don't think that it's there yet though.
Yeah, tier 3 is fine. I don't know. I'd have to play with it more, but it's definitely better than Roach.
Yeah. All right, Dshift. I mean, we just like it didn't get too many good new tools or anything. We just throwing this in tier 4 because I think we kind of talked about this before we started recording, but it's just that like if you're playing Dshift, you win too late right now compared to other decks.
I mean, you're winning on the same turn, and everybody else is either winning earlier or playing decks that have a lot more action going on. It's definitely better than Roach, though.
I could see like a super tech, because I mean like Chimera like shits on egg like pretty hard. If you drop it on 7, pretty good, and you're playing a bunch of just removal stuff anyway. I don't think anything else is there. Like it probably just beats Roach and that's it. And then also like, so yeah, I don't know. I or did I say Roach? I meant egg. Sorry, I think it beats egg. I don't know. I kind of want to put it on 3 just because I think it's you could build it in a way that's like my entire locals is all egg. I'm just gonna play this Dshift deck where I get to Chimera really fast, and I have like every removal in the game, because you just play, like that, and I think it actually could be good. And you have concentration,
Mhm.
which is a really good against aggro decks. I kind of want to say three, actually. I kind of want to say three, but it's up to you guys. If you guys both say four, it's fine.
I think we just leave it here at the top of tier 4 because like it might hyper specifically beat egg maybe, but I'm not sure about every other matchup. So we can leave it at the top of tier 4, and at the end
Yeah.
we'll kind of reevaluate the tier list before we finalize it. And if we need to move it up, we'll move it up.
I would say the only thing that would make me want to put into tier 3 is thinking about what I said earlier, where it's like if you want to spike an event, this is a card. Like if you're just going to go to 10 events and you want to spike one of them, I think Dshift is able to have events it can spike, if that makes sense. Like it has draws where you just consistently you combo on 7, and then your opponent doesn't kill you before then, and you win. And they got the downside, you got the upside, and you just have to have that happen a few times in a row. Whereas with Roach, you have to do that every single game if you ever want to win a single time. Because
Yeah,
otherwise, your Roach just dies.
I could see that. It's like the kind of deck where if you have the read, you have the read, and you go into the room where you're like, okay, more than half of my matchups are going to be like egg or something. This will be like, as long as I hit the right pairings, I'm going to be good this event, right?
Yeah, like the reason to play a deck like this is literally if you want to be scissors to the metagame too, where there's like, there's rock and then everybody's playing paper to beat rock, and you come in and you say, okay, here's my scissors.
Yeah.
Because I don't think this beats egg.
You don't think it beats egg?
Not
Then what's the
straight
point
D
of the
shift, not
deck?
straight D shift. There's no point. That's why I think it's not very good. I think you have to, I think you have to spike if you want to win with it.
All right. Let's go Ramp Dragon here, our good girl Forte. I think this time around, let me know what you guys think. I think Ramp Dragon is probably in the worst state it's probably going to be in for a while. Because I think any point we start hitting like these decks that either beat it in too fast, or or what's it called? Or there's like really heavy control decks running around saying like, that's cool, you played your one big guy per turn. But I can just remove it and play a smaller threat, and you eventually kind of lose out because your one big threat is getting answered while they're still developing their board and answering your one big threat. But I mean, at the same time, the deck still has free Fortes, which is all you need to win a game sometimes. So
there's like a line in the center of this tier list, and it's like a green line that just is consisting of Forte and Dragon Oracle, and there's just like Dragon cannot go below this line if you put those 6 cards in your deck.
I've been playing this deck actually a good amount because I'm not gonna have access to the set 5 cards for a little bit. So I was just trying to figure out like what deck to play. I liked this deck a lot in the last format, but once people started, well, they still haven't put the good like cards in the deck, but like I thought it beat Forest for a while, and then I realized like if Lily gets involved, the deck is just complete garbage. I think that this is an insane deck if you read that everyone's playing egg, everyone's playing aggro decks. I think if you read that those two things are correct, or like is basically the majority of the matchups, I think this deck is insane. I think outside of that, if you see a control deck, you lose. I think you can beat Force if they don't play Lily. And so yeah, I would say tier 2. I think this is a tier 2 deck, but
you still think it's worth tier 2? I feel like it's like
I think so.
maybe. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think, Shepard? Still
I
tier
think
2?
I think it's bottom of tier 2. Like I said, there's that green line that goes straight through the middle of this tier list. And puts
Yeah.
a very hard, like, yeah, everybody. The thing is, we're no longer at the place where all those set 1 cards are still the best possible thing you can be doing, but they're just so good. Like, I don't know. It's hard for me to rate a faction with so many good cards too lowly. And I don't think
Yeah.
everybody else, I think it is kind of more what I would consider the gatekeeper, where it's like, are you better or are you worse than the guy on the set 1 strategy plus, the 5 to 10 new cards?
I think
Yeah.
the other aspect to me is I think it's the only control deck that has a good matchup against Egg. I think all the other control decks have a really bad matchup into Egg.
Yeah,
At least without Lyriel. But
I think
obviously
it's a
Lyriel
nice-
you can put into every single deck. So
And you can tech it so that you have like a good healing package, which I think is huge.
Yeah, personally for me, I feel like ramp is like the top of tier 3, but I mean, if you guys are putting a bottom tier 2, it's like this, that's like the same to me almost. So I'm totally fine with that. It definitely is the gatekeeper of like you must be this tall to enter the ride.
And we
Yeah.
can come back later and see
Yeah.
what we think.
Now I'm really curious what you guys think about discard because I'm really torn.
I think it's probably better than ramp, but I mean, I've I've played this card every format basically since it came out, and I think it's pretty strong again because it's so easy to win with this deck if you know what you're doing. It feels really like that type of deck in like other card games where you can just play it forever, and if you know what you're doing, you're just gonna have a really good chance to win everything. Because you can, if you're scared of egg, you can put in some extra healing. I do think that if people are putting Lyrial in their deck, it obviously hurts this deck, but I don't think as much as egg because you still have Forte, you still have Og. Um, I don't know. I think it's better than Ramp. I think it's really good. I'd almost argue it might be better than Disdain right now. Like I think it might be the best dragon.
Well, my question to you, do you think the version of Discard Dragon is more of the pure Discard Dragon stuff, or do you include the Disdain package in Discard
No,
Dragon?
no. I don't. I don't think you can play the Disdain stuff with discard. I think it's really bad. I
I
think
agree.
that I think that there's only one discard card in Disdain, and you have
Yeah.
to put all the other 15 cards in. So you have 15 cards that do nothing for your game plan. And they don't. It's not like because before that was how it works, but they were all control tools, right? Like
Yeah.
this card was okay, half control tools, half the discard stuff. I don't think Disdain you can put this like mid-range tempo or not tempo, but just like mid-range stuff into and swap it with the control package, especially in this format.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like whenever I looked at the Disdain stuff, I mean, I see like some JP lists they like try to match these things two together. I haven't tried it myself, but every time I looked at it, it didn't look very promising. So I kind of agree, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I think for me, the green line still exists here that like keeps it. It's in tier 2, I think. But my big decision of which side of ramp is it on, I feel like it's like more, it's not more consistent than ramp. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's like Prussia said. It's like if you know the deck and you can just consistently execute its game plan and like know your lines, you can reliably get a good chunk of your wins in. I just don't think its power level at the ceiling is good enough compared to the other like top strategies, especially in a world where we know, regardless of where we put Lashena on this tier list, people are going to be showing up with Lashena, and it's having a bunch of decks running around with healing for egg, and then also healing that comes in the form of like, hey, heal 2 every turn, can really undo your clock because that's the resources are really spare in discard, right? Like you need to calculate damage per cards in hand, per cards drawn, right? And so any amount of major, minor, turn by turn healing can like really screw you on those numbers.
I think one thing too is that I think we kind of all agree like um the angel that like stops burn damage, right? Like it'll be around and decks will like abuse it at some point. And I think when your main strategy a lot of time is like poke your opponent down with burns and then like kind of try to close out with the big swing from what's that in the card again? I'm blanking right now. Ogre, and like adding that extra burn damage on top of that to like get even bigger reach, because a lot of times there are just games where like Ogre comes down and you're like, yeah, he's swinging for 12, good game. And this time around, not always being guaranteeing that extra ping damage like along the way once they drop that 3-drop, and now you have to spend turns getting rid of the either playing conflag or using the extra pings to remove it because no one's gonna engage that follower, makes it a little bit rough. So I think personally, like I'm cool with putting this in tier 2, but I think definitely Ramp Dragon is probably in a better position than Discard Dragon, but Discard Dragon is still like a solid deck.
Well, okay, so a couple things. One, I think this deck, while it does Lyrial being in the format does hurt, it's the deck that gets hurt that has the easiest way to remove it because you have Serpent's Wrath.
Mhm.
One, and then two, I think My issue with Ramp Dragon, or the reason I would say discard is better than Ramp Dragon, is I think that they're like it Ramp auto loses 2 matchups. It auto loses 2 matchups. It has no chance to beat Control Haven. It has no chance to beat Control Abyss. There's just no chance, And I think discard doesn't have any of those matchups. That's why I think discard is better than Ramp. Is because I don't think you can play a deck that just auto loses this format, to like some.
That's fair.
That's very fair. I would also say, I think Lyrial is less of a concern than the amount of healing for me, because I think you're gonna run into a lot more healing than you are Lyrial.
Mm-hmm.
I put it up to the left of Ramp. I think the only big thing for me is I feel like Ramp can slot, if you wanted to, you can slot Lyrial into Ramp a little easier than discard. If you want to include that tech, but I don't think that's enough for me to really
help you
weigh
beat
it.
the auto win match or the auto.
Yeah.
No. I'm saying like I'm comparing these two decks and their ability to like tech for egg and do other things.
Okay.
So like Ramp can tech for egg a little bit better, especially because they can also put dragon eggs and other things in, or dragon's nest, whatever the card is called. Yeah, I'd say discard's better.
Okay, yeah, I'm not gonna really fight you guys on that because I'm not totally sold in my position either. So, all right, we got Heal Haven here, the Skaz special.
This might be the best deck in the format. I think it's. I've been playing this deck a lot. It's okay.
I think it's bottom of 3.
I think it's better than most people are gonna estimate it is. I think the new 2-drop is huge. I think the slower, grindier games kind of give you a little bit more time.
Lean into it, yeah.
My thing is there's like a million ways to build the deck, and I can't say I found the one that I think is good yet, so I can't confirm it exists. I would put it at the top to middle of 3. So definitely to the left of Spinaria for me. I know Prussia's going to disagree, though.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think I would disagree that it's like better or worse than Spinaria, because I think they're both decks that you shouldn't be playing at all. I don't know. I just think it's. I just think it's the format we're going into. You can have 4 lucky games, I guess.
Yeah. All right. I'm biased and I like Heal Haven, even though I do think it's like a deck you shouldn't be playing right now. It got like a couple cute tools now, but like or an extra like way to heal here and there, and that was kind of it. It's still in the same game plan. I guess it kind of like can do well into egg, and then you have all that healing and hopefully build a board that actually ends the game. But I'm not super impressed yet. Maybe Shepard will find the magical list.
Dude, we need Skaz to get back from Japan. I don't have the Haven juice, I can't do this without him.
It's true.
Cool.
All right. So we have Control Haven here. I don't know if this is a controversial take or not. I think this time around, I feel like Control Haven is a tier 1 deck. I think it does well into like almost everything. I don't really foresee it like just hard losing to anything too bad, unless you guys have any other experience into it.
So I think this is the first deck where it comes up, but my take is I don't think there's any other tier 1 deck besides Egg. So if you guys don't agree with that, I'm down to put it at 1, because I do think it's like top of tier 2. But to me, I don't think there's any deck in the format that is on the same level as Egg.
I actually agree with Prussia. I think the tier list is like S, which is just Egg, and then A after it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so I think every other deck, like if you take Egg out of the equation, I think every other deck we can have like discussion about, okay, here, matchup here, and this, But I just think I don't think any other deck is better than Egg. So I would say top of tier 1. Or I'm sorry.
Top of tier 1, no. Top of tier 2.
I
would agree.
I kind of agree with you guys completely, because in my head right now, the 2 best decks, like well, at least in my head, the 2 best decks I would consider would be Egg Haven and Control Haven. And so like for me, like Control Haven was just the second best deck in my opinion. And I mean, if you guys are kind of like in that same zone, then I'm fine with having it be like the gatekeeper to tier 1, right?
I'm not even sure if it's the best tier 2 deck though. Like I don't think I agree that it's the second best deck.
I don't know if I would put it. I don't know. I'd have to think about the other decks that follow it. I think it's top of tier 2 as it is in this tier list
Yeah.
right now.
Mhm.
Like I think it's better than everything else that we've shown. And then it's hard because like with one notable exception, the deck doesn't hard lose, but it also doesn't hard win, if that makes sense. Unless you are either against ramp or you're against aggro and you get your like anti-aggro hand and you get the nuts, right? And I think being able to like hard win a game is something I actually put a lot of value on in Shadowverse.
Yeah, I kind of agree. If you watch, especially the top 8 games of the GP, but just the GP in general, there's a really funny. The first top 8 game, it was Haven versus Control Haven versus this like Forest build that was like tech to the brim. I think it was like 43 cards or something. But and it was really interesting to watch how the way the end game happened was if the Forest player had Silverbolt at all, he wins like 5 turns earlier. But he played 2 elephants and they both got acolytes. And
Wow.
I just feel like people are gonna realize like if we just play not Silverbolt instead of Elephant, but just if we put Silverbolt in, we're gonna beat Control Haven. I think if Control Abyss really hard beats Control Haven. If you're playing all the discard stuff, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I just think Egg Haven can also beat it as well because you like Egg Haven just will be able to like amass so much just early game value that they might not be able to answer in time. Like if Egg goes first and they just hit, one drop, Epitaph. Uh, I like Rapunzel in that matchup specifically because it blocks an Aegis swing, and also you get extra 4 damage. But if you just curve out and it's like one of your good curves, I don't think Control Haven could win.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah, that's what
I
I'd say.
agree with pretty much all of that.
I feel
I do.
like. Oh, sorry.
I also
Go ahead.
I was gonna say for Forest, I don't know what people are gonna play. Like I said, I'm pretty set on not playing Forest this set. If I was gonna show up to an event with Forest, 2 Silver Ball is like the minimum for me. I was on 1 last set. This set, I think you have to be on 2 if you want to reliably win because you just are gonna need more damage to get there. Elephant's not as reliable.
I can agree with that. My biggest thing is maybe I'm overvaluing uh, that we have like extra knowledge because of we know what JP was playing. We know most people are going to basically copy paste JP for quite a while also. And if we're all on the same idea that Egg Haven is the best deck, I feel like at that point most Control Haven lists will tech to like stop the burns and stuff like that. Like turns leading up to Silverbolt, I was like, yeah, that's when I play my Angel. Otherwise, like into Egg, I can just curve it on 3, and it's quite annoying for them. They have to do something to remove it. Otherwise, they'll have to use the book plus the Russia Cell amulet. I forget the 2-drop amulet, right? To
They can't do that. It's not Fable.
Oh, you're right, it's not Fable, but um, to get rid of the 5 health, follower, it just seems quite annoying. I feel like because we have that extra knowledge, people will build their decks slightly differently, or the people who actually care about playing Control Haven will build it in a way that like these 2 matchups aren't as like bad, or like they're more favorable than they were in JP at the time. But I could be completely out of my mind and completely wrong here.
I would just say like I don't think that Lyriel does much for Control Haven because it's kind of like how we talked about Marwyn in the card review, where the payoff you're getting doesn't matter because the payoff in other decks you're getting is I'm stopping damage, but I'm also getting damage. I'm getting the 2 every turn. It's a really high statted follower that's really that counters their game plan. Because if she didn't have the deal 2 damage, I think she'd be awful.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I think like the reason Aegis didn't play Lyriel is because I just don't think that card is good in the deck because it doesn't go to your game plan. You're not trying to kill that. You're not trying to like get that incremental damage. Also, you have Themis. It's just
You also
Themis
your
in that
plan
card.
is like against direct damage is to out heal it through a series of cards that you're gonna play. Your acolytes, undoes it, Dracomancer's rights, so on and so forth. I think there's one major thing talking about like metagame considerations, which is compared to JP, Americans love aggro. we want to turn our followers sideways as much as possible. So I think that like you've seen that in the way that Sword is like overrepresented versus Japan in almost every metagame, which I do think is a buff to Heal Haven.
I think when
Not Heal Haven,
feel
sorry,
yeah,
Control Haven.
I feel like the card, even though it still plays into the game plan, because a lot of my biggest issues with Control Haven prior to this was that if I didn't get the damage in early enough, I want one swing from Aegis to win the game for me. Like I want 12 damage to win the game, and if I can't get them down to that point where my 12 damage will win the game, then I feel like I'm just like playing Aegis feels horrible a lot of the times, because sometimes I'll play the Aegis on the board, it gets outed by like a couple followers and like an AoE damage or whatever, and then it's kind of over for me. That's what was my experience prior to this. But I feel like having that, okay, I curve this on 3, and every turn I'm pinging you for 2 and pressuring your life total to the point that now I'm here. Here's my Aegis turn and swing in for the game there, instead of having to like do another turn of Aegis or another turn with something else to win the game. I guess maybe I'm overvaluing that a lot here, just from my prior experience, and I was snake bitten prior to this, and so I think this is like a huge like bump for Control, like in general.
I just don't think that where I don't think the win con anymore is swing once with Aegis. I think you have to swing twice. I don't think there's any way the meta, because it's either you're winning because they ran out of resources and you have a John on the field or something, and they just are drawing off the top and it's over, or you're winning because you have Aegis and they can't win. I don't think the game plan from every game I've watched of this deck in this format, the game plan isn't anymore to swing once with Aegis, and that shows with the way the deck is constructed. Like there's no more, like there's a lot of types of cards that we were playing in set 2 that don't exist anymore, in the deck. Like there's no more, what's the Rad Angel, Radiance Angel, no more like that card where it's like, oh, if this guy sticks, I can, get a couple damage. It's also healing is just so relevant in the format where like even if the deck you're playing against has no healing, you have to get Lyriel off 5 times and for the Aegis to, or 8 or 4 times if you buff it, the Aegis after with the thing, which I just don't think is realistic, because you're gonna have to Themis at some point, I imagine, or it's gonna die. Because in the board based matchups you're gonna have to Themis, in the non-board based matchups it's just gonna die.
Yep. I think Aegis is secondary to the construction of the whole deck, if that makes sense, where it's like you are a control deck and then here's just the best possible win con for your strategy, and then you build that into your game plan. You don't build the whole deck around Aegis is the best card in the game, so I'm playing this control strategy. It's like a combination of cards all in a line.
All right. Well, I think there's nothing more to talk about on Aegis, at least. Move on here. Midrange Elephant. I'm pretty sure the deck is mostly midrange at this point. I assume we all kind of agree it's tier 2, unless you guys have a different.
Yeah, it's 2. I don't think it's 3, but I don't know. I think it's
this deck.
What do you say?
Don't talk to me about this deck.
I don't know how good this deck is. I don't know. I think with Control Haven, like I think my take is like I don't even know if you can play Elephant at all. Like, how do you play Elephant going into this format?
I don't even know if it's tier 2. I don't know if that's too drastic. I don't know. It's like
I think it's better than Ramp. I think it's
definitely better than Ramp. I think it has the tools. I really like the game plan of filling up your EX zone. And then Cassiopeia is such a huge swing against all these other mid-range decks where you get a blow up a board with 1 card. So Cassiopeia comes down a lot of times. It's going to be dealing like 8+ damage, I feel like. It just seems.
What do you fill in your EX?
So a lot of the it's this the 2-drop that we talked about in the review where it brings itself back to your hand when it
the flower doll.
Yeah, and it gives you a puppet in the EX zone, so you get to loop that a few times while also like kind of controlling the board. So you'll get a couple tokens into your EX zone, which extends your Cassiopeia like turn 5 or turn 6 or whatever. When you come down with that card, you're actually getting a lot more spread out damage than you were before, and while keeping hand size up. So like you can still have that threat of like I can elephant you if I have it, and if you don't play around it, you're going to lose the game. But also, my Cassiopeia is now coming down and clearing like multiple things almost guaranteed. That's like my feeling on the entire deck at this point. It's definitely way more mid-rangey. We're not trying to like pressure our opponent earlier with like too much, and then just like try to hopefully win on like a turn 6 and 7 like Elephant or Silverbolt. But now we can actually play more towards like I build my board, still keep my hand size up, and like you have to deal with this stuff because my one Cassiopeia just like cleared 3 of your things.
That I don't know. I don't I don't think that's realistic. I don't know. Because I don't know. Like you. Okay, so if you just put Flower Doll in the mix, you know, and the amulet that we're playing anyway with the Ancient Elf and stuff, you have to find the Flower Doll, and then if you're going first, you only get 2 times to play it and evo it before the Cassiopeia turn comes down, and the 2 turns you're doing is just 3 damage on a tapped thing. I feel like you're gonna get run over by Egg. I feel like you're just gonna get washed.
I mean, that could be the case. It could just be poorly positioned into Egg, but I feel like the mid-range strategy and like using the Cassiopeia and your Egg Zone that way is like really strong, especially into like every other deck.
I mean, Cassiopeia, Elephant, and Silverbolt are insane cards. So they also, I don't know. That's why this deck can't go too low. I just think the tools that it got, like taking it and making it more of a mid-rangey strategy with like, I mean, it was kind of mid-rangey before, but just adding like Flower Dolls just doesn't feel like it's enough to compete with most of the other decks. I would put it, I think Ramp Dragon it's like tied with, where it's just 2 strategies that everybody else got stronger, but they didn't really get stronger by the same amount.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Because I guess like my question is like, why are we playing Flower Doll instead of the Automaton Soldier? Like, if that's our thing is like, oh, we want to fill the EX up. Like, why aren't we playing Automaton Soldier and Fairy Circle?
Well,
I don't think
the thing is,
Fairy Circle's not good right now.
Yeah, Fairy Circle is good next set,
I
but
don't agree. I think it's pretty good.
The Soldier is like, it can still be played in the deck as well and help towards that strategy. But I think the big thing about, at least for me, is the Flower Doll coming back to your hand and having a resource that's like looped, and I can replay it if I want to answer something while also generating a token for Cassiopeia, and then like I can even play the tokens onto the board or whatever. And keeping the hand size up still threatens like a little bit more, because they have to know you're on Elephant because you're just playing Forest, which means they have to be somewhat afraid of Elephant, even though I don't think Elephant is like the best way to win right now. I think you want to see Silverbolt more times than Elephant in this like meta right now. But I don't know. That's my personal feelings on it, and like from my experience, that's what I've seen. So, but I think at this point we're just kind of arguing where on tier 2 we want to put the deck. So I don't think it matters that much.
Yeah, put it to the left of Ramp. I think we're all.
I kind of think it's worse than Ramp.
I thought you both said. I mean, I don't even know.
I did originally. Now I'm less on I think it's worse.
Yeah, that's fair. I might play a couple games with it just because I have it sleeved up. But let's go to the next. Let's go to the next card that involves top checks, but they only gave you 20 playable traits. Surely they won't make this mistake again.
We got Thief.
Oh, this is Thief. Sorry,
yeah.
Disdain. No, this is the good. This is the good one. This is the good playable traits.
Yeah,
this is the one where you don't put the top check cards in your deck.
We got the Thief sword here. I think do we all agree tier 2?
Yeah,
I mean 2. Yeah,
I think it's above discard for me. I think the strategy is consistent.
Sure think that.
If you want to go and you want to spike and get your buy, this is like when I was saying that earlier. This is the deck I was thinking of. You show up, you roll your dice, you just run over people, you go home. It's like everything you did with Hero Sword in the last set, but it's in terms of that aspect, but it's just more resilient, faster. It has one card that lets you do fun stuff, but then the rest of the deck is just like good, efficient beats. I assume this is not the mid-rangey version.
It is, right?
I think it's the mid-range. I think the mid-range version, like if you play, yeah.
Well, we're just totally wrong. I don't know. I like Aggro Thief so much.
Really, I think that deck.
I think the deck's really good.
Are you like Aggro Thief with like the 2 good heroic entry and the other card, or?
Well, I guess it depends on what you're calling the mid-range version, because like what do you delineate between those
It's
two
the
things.
usurpation cards, and then you play the Leos, and you
Yeah.
play the probably most lists played like Angelic Snipe and sort of that you play the Finas, you play
Well, yeah,
what
you play the Finas in either version. I don't think are there
well, I
people
think you
playing
played like
aggro thief without Finas?
6 to 9 1 drops, like not like 12 or whatever you'd want with
Okay,
aggro.
that's not too
Um,
far off from what I'm playing because I'm similar, no
well, but you're
snipes,
playing like
but I'm on.
Jerry and stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I'm on 9 1 drops. I'm on Jerry. Yeah, I think that deck's good. I'm surprised you guys are that low. Is it not even on here?
No, I don't think that's a real
Whoa,
deck at
you guys are
all.
crazy.
I mean,
Because it's worse than it's worse than the aggro bis deck because it's the worst deck of the your opponent sees Angelic Snipe and Surefire and you just lose. Because other decks it's like, okay, well if that happens to Egg, they have some damage to throw around. If that happens to you, you just lose.
I think
there's nothing you can do.
I think also when I think of Thief aggro, it's more of like or even heroic, like the heroic deck, right? I think the pure heroic deck, like yeah, you can still play it, but I don't think it's like its same form anymore. I legit think if you're gonna play an aggro deck, you kind of play the Thief stuff with like the two good heroic cards, which is heroic entry and Mock Knight, and you bank off of those cards, adding the extra pressure with the deck with Jerry in the top end there. That's how I imagine the deck plays out most of the time. Otherwise, the mid-range version of the deck, I think, leans more heavily to like Leonidas getting value off of things and like winning through that actual attrition. Whereas like we're not racing. I feel like we're never racing our opponent to the finish line with Thief Sword.
Yeah. Because I think that there was a deck in the past that I had this similar thought about, and I'm blanking. But it's the type of thing where if you play the aggro build, you only have one way to play the deck. If you play the mid-range version of the deck, you have the mid-range, game plan. And then if you see Servant into Octress and you're going first, then you're obviously going to play that out. like it's. I think that playing the aggro version of Thief locks you in too much, and also kind of like how you talk about Forest Shepherd, but you're not able to play the good sword cards with the aggro stuff. That's why I don't think aggro Thief is real, and that's why I wasn't too high on aggro heroic, ever, as well. But again, you're good. I mean, again, you're gonna see someone, I topped with I got my buy card and it's some wild ass, crazy aggro deck, 15 1 drops, Jerry.
That's what I'm saying, man. You want to win one event,
but that's not good. Like I don't
I think it's actually. I mean, I think we just disagree on this. I think I might be biased because I played a lot of Lashina into this deck and got destroyed. Maybe because Lashina is worse than I thought it was when I first started doing that testing. But we can go ahead. You guys can put this mid-range deck where you want. Then I think I'm less sold on the mid-range package, but I do think it's still solidly tier 2.
All right, I think the deck is like above Discard Dragon. What are you?
It's exactly where I put aggro. I'll just pretend in my mind it's aggro and say I'm okay.
Well, I mean, aggro's right over here.
So, well, no, that's heroic.
I very heavily think you play like the small package of the good heroic cards, and the rest of the deck is just straight up the Thief deck, like without any of like the super mid-rangey stuff, and you're just playing for the high rolls on that deck compared to like the mid-range deck.
You have 2 aggro decks, and you just try to high roll with either half that you get.
I mean, heroic entry
sounds like I would have blown my brains out if someone told me to play that deck. Like I would just be like,
yeah,
why would you play Shadowverse?
Heroic entry is still a really, really good card, even if it doesn't hit like Mock Knight. So you have a chance to high roll. We have access to way more storms that are 3-drops now, right? There's like technically 9 you could play, I think, right? Or more than that, maybe. Which means that heroic entry is going to hit some kind of storm. But if you hit the Mock Knight, you go, I'm winning this game now. Here's this 5/5 storm damage on 3 or whatever, right? So it's like playing that isn't bad. You play the Goblin 2/2 hero card also, and like that's all you really need. Because we're just straight up the aggro game plan where we occasionally get a high roll. If not, we still get to play our good 3-drops or whatever comes out of the top 4 cards, right? unless you guys heavily disagree to that. Because I
No,
think that
I agree. I just don't think it matters. I mean, we're not even
Yeah.
talking about the deck yet, but I think
yeah.
I think heroic, whatever. I think whatever that deck is awful. So it
Yeah, I
doesn't matter.
agree.
I think we should just go to the next deck.
All
Let's
right.
go to
I agree with you, though.
let's
I
go to
agree with
Disdain.
what
the
did you
way
call it in
play
this
it,
review?
though.
Disdain?
Yeah,
Disdain?
Dissident.
This is the
Dissident.
dissidents. Well, Prush, I think you've played with this deck the most.
Yeah, I played with the deck. I think it's better than ramp, but I think it's just right next to ramp. Right now, I don't know how you're supposed to construct it. In a way, next set we don't want to talk about the future, but you can't play the way it was played next set and had a lot of success next set this set, and I don't really think there is a build of it that makes you want to play this over discard right now if you're choosing dragon. If you want to play with the oracles and the fortes, I think that discard is the way. I think that the same amount of bad hands you'll see with discard is happens with this with disdain. This you're just gonna have the same experience. Gamu is your amulet. Where it's like, wow, I didn't see it this game, or wow, I saw 3 and I'm winning. It's very similar experiences because I played this card a lot, and when I picked this deck, I was like, wow, all of these cards are almost one for one, feeling wise, like discard. And I don't think the upside is there because the upside on discard is they can't interact with it and you just win because you just have 2 ammons on the field and you have the flute and it's over. I think this deck does not have a board state like that or hand like that where it's just my auto win hand. And I don't think there's 21, 22 other cards to put in. Well, no, what? If 16 because you're playing Forte and Oracle, other cards that make it put it there. So I would say it's better than Ramp, but I think it's right next to Ramp. I don't think it's better than Elephant.
Really? I would put this at the top of tier 3. I guess I would need to play with it some more. I just really don't like. This is such a classic Shadowverse thing where it's like having only 19 cards be the strategy makes it kind of hard to test and evaluate. And I mean, yeah, sure, the other 20 cards get to be just like good dragon cards. But I don't know if it quite hits tier 2. Like if you hit all of your pieces and you get your little machine going, it's good, but you have to find them and there's not that many of them.
And also, like, once you find them, you have 2 cards in hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's always been the dragon issue. Is
you have to find the draw engine guy, the 2-drop. Like if he's not like if you find everything but you don't find him, your game plan just gets so much worse.
Yeah. I think here about I could do top of 3.
Yeah,
I just think yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think the package is good. I think when you see all the good shit that you want to see, it's a tier 2 deck. But the decks where or the games where you fumble, which will be a little bit more often than you would like, the deck becomes like tier 3, and you just kind of like fumble your way, and you're like, oh well, hopefully I got my fortes to like kind of close out the game, even because I'm struggling here. That's been my like evaluation of the deck. I think the way the deck plays is a lot more fun than the other decks because it's just different right now, at least for me, obviously. So, but yeah, I'm totally cool with either like even like bottom of tier 2, top of tier 3, whatever for this deck, unless you guys really want to fight it.
I think that's good for me.
Yeah.
All right, we got our boy here, Control Abyss. I think this deck is insanely powerful. I think it gets really sad though when it plays against like maybe it doesn't. I haven't played a bunch into Egg, but I feel like a deck that doesn't care because it's going to lose its hand anyway. I don't know what have your guys' experience been so far with this?
It's funny because I was super down on this deck, and as we've been going through the tier list, every deck I'm talking about, I'm like, oh my god, I hope I don't see that fucking the guy that can't talk, dude. I do not want to see Rule 9. Please don't show me Rule 9. So I don't know. I actually like thinking about it more. Like I think it's really well positioned in the format. I just think it's like a control deck that loses to aggro really hard. It's the it's the only one that like not just Egg, because I think Egg it's gonna be rough, but again, that's the best deck in the format. But
Yeah.
I think that it's gonna have trouble against Heroic. It's gonna have trouble against like these awful aggro decks that people could be pulling up with, and I don't really like that feeling. And also it's Abyss, and Abyss has never been consistent ever. So I don't know. I think like I think it's above Octrus, but that's because I think Octrus is kind of higher than I think she should be. So yeah, I think it's higher than Octrus, but like I guess it's the third. No, it's not the third, but yeah, I think it's above Octrus for me. I think it's really well positioned. I just don't think it's like an actually good deck. I think it's a really good meta call, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Go
ahead.
ahead.
I think this deck rules. I think this deck is great. I'm with Kit. Like I was, my only concern with this deck originally was like this deck beats like everything, like not below it on the tier list because it's not on the tier list yet, but it just like destroys a lot of strategies we've gone over. And we're really rating high these mid-range control strategies, and it kind of blitzes through them. My only concern initially was like, all right, how's the Egg matchup? And after just a little bit of testing, it's not atrocious, you know? I was like, oh yeah, you're gonna Executioner Egg, and they're gonna have no hand already, like whatever. But the truth is, like, it actually plays out a lot better than that. So I'm pretty high on this. Like, I would almost put this either on either side of Control Haven. I'm not sure.
How many games of Egg versus Control?
Not a lot, just a few. I played
Like,
a less than 5.
So yeah,
So like
yeah,
I was worried, but I was like, oh, you're not getting destroyed. That was my main concern. Was like, does Egg destroy this deck?
I think Egg is favored into the matchup just because like the main strategy of the deck doesn't really hurt this deck too much. But like a lot of times it's just like you have to be able to like either Egg like misses filling up their EX zone before you can start ripping cards out of their hand that actually matter to like find Alice and stuff like that. But Egg is just so consistent at finding Alice, being able to turn 3 Alice and stuff like that. A lot of the times you need to go second into the matchup. If they win the die roll and they make you go first, you probably lose a lot of the time, more than you want. But one thing about this booster, at least for like the whole discard controls package stuff for me, is that this like fixed all the issues I've ever complained about when it comes to like Abyss control. I think Precious right that the deck will struggle into really good aggro decks. Like a good aggro deck will probably beat this deck more often than not. But because of how the meta is currently set, we expect to see more mid-rangey control strategies, which means this can like is positioned to just like kind of roll over everything and hopefully like win the die roll against Egg so it can go second and do everything it wants to do. And that's kind of how it can get there. I think it's kind of around the same area of like either above or below Octrus, kind of what Pressure is saying. I think maybe it could also be better than Control Haven. I just haven't got even enough games against Control Haven yet to even like make a really hard call on it. But I could see it beating that matchup a lot as well, like easily. So
yeah, I mean, the main thing for me is I think it solidly beats so much of the format, and the fact that Egg is favorite. I would probably say that's like a 60-40 matchup in Egg's favor.
Yeah, I would agree.
Before I played a few games of it, I mean, like I said, I don't have a high sample size. I was guessing like it was gonna feel unplayable. You know, like your cards just never line up. But the truth is, yeah, like you want to go second. You really want to hit your Urds, you know, you want to be able to like actually have the discard relevant and hurt them. But the fact that you are so good against everything else and Egg is not an auto lose, I think makes this like minimum goes right before Aegis. Like, I don't know, like I said, which side of it is, but I would put them pretty close in power level. Like, I don't know yet because I haven't played enough games of either.
So we're thinking like kind of right here.
I would, but then I think Prussia's gonna talk us into dropping that.
I'm just gonna say this deck is like well, number one, Kid, did you say you want to go second with you want to give Egg first in this matchup?
Oddly enough, yes. I think the deck performs infinitely better going second, especially into Egg. Because if you're able to like Executioner Evo on 3 and rip out their Alice from their hand, and you look at their hand, they have no other Alices, and they have to spend another turn finding an Alice to start building up. I think that gives you gives you enough tempo to take control of the match. But I feel like if you go first and they're able to do their stuff, get Alice out early, and they already start building up their EX zone with good cards, and then they're going to discard their hand anyway in the next couple turns. Like, your discard stuff doesn't matter, and it doesn't feel as good at that point then. And a lot of the times, a lot of your threats are like 5 health followers, which just lose to an Egg Evo. That's how I've experienced the matchup, but maybe you've had completely different outlooks on it.
I hope that everyone I play, I'm bringing Egg. I hope that everyone I play gives me first. That's all I'm gonna say. But anyway, I think that this deck is a really big unknown because it was played a lot in Japan and did not get did not sniff top 8. And it makes me think that obviously this is not, rocket science. This isn't, very specific, but it does make me wonder how its Control Haven matchup is, because the fact that 4 Control Havens made top 8 and no Control Abyss made top 8, and they're like very similar decks. I think my worry about this deck is that it has no win condition. The win condition is you run your opponent out of resources, but like if you can't do that or you don't find the pieces, I don't know how it, like, what's the win con? Because I don't know how you stuff a deck of all the discard stuff and Executioner, and then you also stuff in like I'm gonna get Israfil in the graveyard and resummon it with Death's Breath. Like, then it's just like an inconsistent deck.
There's 2 versions of a deck that runs around right now. One is just like the straight up control package. We're not playing any of the Angel stuff, none of the Israfils and Death's Breaths. Not even played in that package. Whereas there is the Angel package that still plays the Angel stuff, which is like playing for more of the high roll. I'm gonna discard Israfil, get a turn 6 Israfil, and hopefully take control of the match that way. I think you are right in the sense that the deck does have issues where it doesn't have a solid win condition. I do think, though, the fact that you get to play what's her name, Lyria or whatever.
Lyriel?
Yeah, Lyriel. I think that is a card that applies a lot of pressure in the into the Egg matchup, into all your matchups. Once you get it out, it helps also when in the matchups where you don't have to Executioner as early. You can Executioner the turns after you've developed the Lyriel. So like when you go first, you play Lyriel into Executioner, and you don't take that extra damage also is really, really big. I see versions of the deck, which I think is so confusing because their metagame must have been so, like, locally must have been had a lot of Abyss players, because I've seen every JP list that played like the whole Control Abyss package. They all played 3 PTP. They all played 3 of the Angels, so they could abuse that and just refill their hand over and over and over again really quickly in that sense. Or not quickly, but like they need to see it at some point because their hand size goes to like nothing.
Yeah, I think that's also because of the Control Haven matchup, and like making sure your resources are on par with them. I don't know. I can see it coming together. I
think one thing to note too. Yeah, I think one thing to note too is like when you made the point earlier about it losing to aggro, these events in Japan, unlike our events, are like 2 days. You're playing like 12 plus rounds before you make it to top 8, which means you will hit those jank players that are like, I just came with Hero Sword and now you've lost because you ran into me early on, and that feels bad. Yeah. No, I mean like even in Japan, like because you have 12 rounds, which means like probably the first 4 rounds are like when you hit the most randomest stuff ever, like things you weren't expecting to be like played as heavily, and you just get unlucky and you're like, great, I hit like the guy playing Hero Sword still or something like that, or some aggro deck that I wasn't.
So you mean I see what you're saying? I guess my point is like that exists even worse here because there's only those 4 rounds.
I mean, you do play less rounds too. Anyway, it's a meta. I would say it's. I don't even know. It's a meta call.
Yeah,
I just think the deck's good. I don't think we're gonna come to a solid agreement here.
Yeah, we just kind of all agree it's in tier 2. It's a solid deck. I think at this point it is now. All right, Sanguine, Aggro, Abyss, or whatever you want to call this. Like, I think this deck is like really cool what it wants to do and stuff, but it's probably like it just dies to. I mean, I think
next. Get me out of here.
I mean, you guys, we talked a bunch about it in the set review. Like a lot of its win condition just dies to snipe. So like,
it's just like, what if Roach did a bunch of damage to you and also was like less interesting as a deck and also somehow less consistent and also died to the same things?
Yeah, I think the deck is very like fun to play, but it's definitely not super great. I'm thinking it's better than tier 4 though. I don't know if you guys disagree. I think it's like the bottom of tier 3 type of shit.
Really?
Oh, I think it's bottom. I think it's like bottom of 4.
I think it's worse than Roach. I think it's
at
worse
least
than Roach.
At least in Roach you can kill him with Ancient Elf, you know.
They definitely worse than Roach in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like this is like the deck where, like, yes, your win condition dies a snipe, but it also like revitalizes your win condition over and over again. And I think when it builds the board, it's actually still pretty scary because now we guarantee our skeletons are 3/3s and stuff like that. I think the deck is a little bit better than you guys are giving it credit, but I also not willing to fight on that hill. So
well, I'd be 100% willing to hear you because I wanted to play Seg. I was like cooking, early on. What do you mean by build the board? Like, I like, what do you mean by that? Or like, what do you mean by once you build the board, all the skeletons are 3/3s?
What I mean is that because we actually have a lot of good Sanguine followers now that like will proc Sanguine on play. The big thing is that we have 6 1-drops that will do it for us now, which means that the deck is obviously super aggressive and we're literally like killing ourselves to win the game. So like all your skeleton fighters are always going to be for the most part 3/3s. So a lot of turns is just like turn 1 ambling rate, turn 2 the other 1-drop, I forget her name, plus the 3/3 the skeleton, and like you get a build
1 card in it, 2 cards in hand.
Yeah, and then
that's the issue.
Yeah, but it's the only like real way you could play this deck right now is like a really suicidal aggro deck. Like that's it.
Which yeah, I don't know. To me, that sounds because like I don't know. Like I'd rather just play Goblin into Latho and not hit myself.
I have a secret deck that maybe Kit will let me feature on the channel that I think might be better.
We'll see.
I would say. Yeah. I think Shepard's deck is better than this deck too. I think Shepard's deck is better.
Yeah, go ahead and comment below, subscribe, and say the people demand that Kit covers Shepard's spicy deck.
But if we cover it too early, then you won't be able to.
No, yeah, I've got to go win a couple events with it.
Right. I want to say something, but we might get in trouble by other people.
Yeah. I mean, either way, this is a hill I'm not willing to die on. So, like, if you guys truly feel it's like the worst deck ever, then sure, we'll throw it in tier 4. It'll bottom in tier 4.
We need Kit to get a deck that he's just. I need him to get a deck that he will die on a hill for. I feel like Kit never.
Well, the one deck here I would die on a hill for would literally be the Control Abyss. I love that deck. It's so everything about it, I love it. So like I'm willing to fight to the ends of the earth for this deck, this meta, but unfortunately, I think we all kind of agree it's around tier 2 here.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The final 3 here we should be able to clear up pretty quickly.
Yeah. I haven't played enough Lashina to really know where I want to put it on the tier list, so you guys need to let me know.
I've played it a lot. I mean, relative. I think that it's 3 because it's a control deck that loses to every other control deck, and it doesn't even beat like the other stuff consistently, and you just have to sink so much mana into doing nothing to set your win condition up, and it's not a win condition like Aegis where you win in the next 2 turns. It's I'm just gonna poke you a bunch of times, you know.
Yep.
I think it's 3. I think it's
I would say 3. This is top of 3. Really? Bottom of 3. I think it's a little bit better. I think it's got a little bit more game than that, but I do think Lashina as a card just doesn't generate enough power. Like the card itself is not powerful enough to trend this beyond 3.
I heavily agree. I think it's better than Heal Haven and stuff like for consistency wise, because I feel like this deck is like fairly consistent on like wanting to do its game plan. So do you think it's better than Disdain in that sense? No. Or do you think it's worse?
I think it more consistently executes a worse game plan.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I just remembered that Disdain is in Dragon, which means they have Forte. So
fair.
Okay, Hero Sword. But okay, so my idea of Hero Sword moving forward here is that it's just the aggro version of the Thief deck. you guys seem to be very against that idea.
Yeah, I think half hero, half thief. I'm just like, I think that deck, if that's that's like tier 4.
I just don't care enough. You guys can put this whatever.
Yeah,
It's better than egg. It's better than egg.
I don't know.
You're right. It is better than egg. No.
Make that the thumbnail and then post. Make the thumbnail heroic entry and then better than egg? Question mark? Question mark? Question mark?
Oh man, I hate doing that bait and switch stuff, but maybe that is the true algorithm of YouTube I need to start abusing. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not high on any aggro stuff. I do think like the whole heroic deck in general last set was like the best aggro deck you could be playing. This deck now, I think the best version personally, even though you guys are like it's garbage, is the version that's playing the good heroic cards plus the good heroic stuff that's aggro centric and go from there. But also like, yeah, I'm not like super sold on it just yet either. So I don't know if I can argue it anyway. I do think it's like better than most of the tier 4 stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can put it in top of 4. It plays Goblin.
It does play Goblin, and sometimes the Goblin gets extra health.
Yeah, at least this next one will be pretty interesting.
Okay, so this meta, Uma is completely unbanned. And I've never spent enough time playing with the fully unbanned Uma deck. Have you, Pressure?
Yeah, I played a little. I mean, like set 2, or during.
Yeah, when it was fully unbanned or whenever.
Before we realized it was going to come out banned or whatever,
You also played it recently too. We played a couple games.
Yeah, I played a couple games. I think it's better than Sword. I think it's right below Control Abyss. I think this is sleeper deck. I think this is very similar to Discard Dragon, where if you know how to play the deck, I think this sounds crazy. I think this could just be my bias. This could just be my experience, but I feel like you have to get a little bit luckier in Uma than you have to get with Discard Dragon. But I think they're very similar decks where if you know how to play the deck, just what you're trying to do with the deck, which I will say, I think that with the new unbans, I don't know if people will like immediately be able to go, okay, I know what to do. People still don't know to always evolve the special weeks. I know to never swing if I have the combo in hand. Like there's things that people might not know about the deck because they never played this unbanned version of the deck. But I think that if we're talking about just like a control, like controlled environment where everyone knows how to play every deck, I think this is a really, really strong deck. And I think it's more consistent than Sword. And I think that it's just like what decks, like looking at the decks, obviously the best deck in the game can beat the Dire Vodka. And then Abyss, or sorry, Haven could beat Dire Vodka, like the combo. Not a lot of other decks really can. Dragon can, of course. But that's just always relevant. They have a really good early game. They have probably some of the best removal in the game. And they just have a interchangeable end game that they can play and mess around with depending on what they feel like they need to go into. Like if they, so yeah, I think it's really, really strong.
Yeah,
I'm pressure across the board. That's actually my exact placement. I think Uma is still really powerful, and while it didn't get any new cards, the unnerfing is actually a huge power boost, at least to the consistency of playing it as a tournament deck, because you get to just see a lot more cards, and like Precious said, if you know the deck, if you know the combos, the lines it can take just are immensely powerful and better than most of the like decks that are below it on the tier list.
Yeah, I agree across the board. I think one thing too to point out is the reason it's so powerful now too is like I feel like one of the biggest weaknesses before was like Uma had trouble with wide boards that were going too quickly. And like we said earlier in the beginning and through this whole thing is a lot of the good strategies right now are mid-range to control strategies. And so it's like the perfect sleeper deck where it can come in. It doesn't have to worry too much about like people coming up with the random like hero sword just destroying you or whatever, going wide. and now it has the time and place to like actually set up its board and like win through its normal strategy. It being unnerfed means it's going to be a little bit more consistent, because a lot of the times when I was playing this deck before, the games I lost, especially in mirrors, was my opponent saw more Daiwas than me, or I saw no Daiwas like until like turn 8 or something, and my game was like over at that point, because I just lost all the advantage, because you really want to see Daiwa at like turn 4, 5, 6 and so forth. But yeah, I agree with you guys completely across the board.
I will say an interesting thing about it is it's am I blanking on it? Abyss? Oh, yeah. No. So it's one of 2 decks in tier 2 that has no healing. And I do think that's like a negative. I think it in Sword just don't have any healing. Every other deck has healing, which is good against Egg, you know. I think that is something to think about, is that every like to play against Uma is like every piece of damage you get in matters. And I do think that is scary for it in the Egg matchup, because Egg is just going to be, hey, here's my epitaph, you know, the 2 damage is going to stick forever, you know. And I mean, I know Uma has healing, but there's no realistic way to get the healing in the deck, because it's,
I think the healing, like the good healing of the deck too, like if you like slot it in, it comes too late for the deck for the deck to really matter. You could get away with it before, when Egg was not the full deck it is now, where it was more clunky and like it wasn't guaranteed that one they weren't going to keep their board. They if you pressure them early, they lose their entire hand. Sometimes they just don't see the Egg or something weird like that. Before, you could get away with it and play like was it Super Creek that heals 5 or whatever. You could get away with playing that card or whatever. Now I think it's just too slow. The healing comes too late. And like the only time that's actually going to matter is when your Egg opponent is like having a heart attack, so they can't play the game anymore. But that's like the only time I think that healing really is going to come up often, if you're playing at like really high levels.
yeah.
All right. Do we want to change anything on this at all? Do you guys?
I realized halfway through, like, I should have picked this up before we started recording, but we probably should have switched Roach for like the Hunter deck, because I think that
What Hunter deck
we'll talk about. But yeah, other than that, I think it's fun.
What Hunter deck? The 10 copies of playable cards you can put in a deck. I think Hunter would be at the bottom of this list.
I mean, I feel like
I tried really hard.
I feel like Hunter, like I think you said it best, Prescia, in the set review, where it was just like you can splash these certain Hunter cards to get the Archer or whatever, like consistently. I think that was like the only thing I super liked about most of the Hunter stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Do you think the Hunter stuff would be higher than tier 4?
Yeah, definitely.
Really?
I've been trying to make some lists and stuff, and I've come to a couple that I really, really like. I think that are actually really at least hovering around 3. But yeah, that's all right. I think
Okay.
I mean, I agree, because in the tier, because it was after the set review, and I really started looking at some of the cards and stuff, and I really was like, I think that I think that there is some stuff you can put together, but maybe we'll have to do a video about that, or not, because I'll play it once and be like, yeah, this deck sucks.
You're like, wait, what was I smoking that day?
Wait. Yeah.
All right. Well, you heard it here. Maybe tier 3 Hunter. We'll see what happens if Prescia goes into the kitchen and comes out with something.
I'm gonna lose to one. Well, it sucks. I'm not even gonna have access to the cards for a while. I don't even know if I'm gonna play a new deck this format. But
yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of incentive to like really grind out this format, other than if you want the buy card. But that kind of wraps up our tier list. Unfortunately, Shepard had to go, so Shepard says goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye, Shepard.
I guess this is it.
What deck are you gonna play?
Oh, I'm only gonna play Abyss, Control Abyss.
Only Abyss. Okay.
Yeah, I don't like.
I'm glad you're in Vegas. Now I don't want to play.
Yeah, I want to be the hand terrorist guy.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm not gonna know I'm gonna run into an Abyss.
I'm gonna be out here just like ripping everyone's hands apart, and it's gonna be great. I'm gonna love it. But yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with this list overall. I think I think by the end of it, I think you guys fully convinced me. Like, I think Egg is just the only deck that should be in tier 1. I think one thing to point out though before we close out, I think the fact that we kind of argued a lot about a lot of these tier 2 decks, I think this meta is a lot more open than, you know, even though like we have Egg as the best deck, I don't think it's just a one deck format. It's definitely way more open than like what, like when you first glance at this tier list, it's way more open than it actually looks, right?
Yeah, because I think that every single one of these tier 2 decks, besides Uba, I guess, but can just go Tekken Angel Sight, Tekken Surefire, Tekken Lyrial, and that's 9 cards, and you just have a really good chance to beat Egg. And I think every single one of these decks can do that, besides Uma, of course. But
yeah, for sure. I think Egg is just the deck that kind of warps everyone else around. Yeah. Like, this is the strategy you got to care about the most to beat. All right, I think with that being said, I think we're pretty satisfied. Thank you for making it this far. Thank you to Shepard and Presha for joining me. You guys have been so much help figuring out this meta.
Thanks for having us on. I appreciate it. It's fun to talk about the different decks and stuff, and it's fun to have discussions, and I wouldn't call them arguments because, you know, we don't really care that much. But you know, I like hearing you guys' opinions about the game, and yeah, thanks for having me and Shepard on.
Yeah, I got any shout outs or anything you want before we go?
Please let me go first as Egg. Please let me go first.
You guys heard it here first. Make sure he goes first in Egg, please. All right, I think that's it. Thanks for watching all that stuff. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Tell us how wrong we are and how dumb we are. We love to hear it. Change our minds or whatever you're going to do. Besides that, we hope to see you guys in our other videos later.
Bye-bye.